Hello, and welcome to Crit Fail. Today, we are joined by the always effervescent Emily and two random
Hello.
guys.
I am one of them.
You've got names, the both of you.
So, we are going to talk about Dragonbane, which is a very old game in a new edition that has recently come to our attention. And what is Dragonbane?
So, Dragonbane is a Swedish role-playing game that was actually originally it's from 1982, but it's never been translated into English until this year. So the game's actually 40 years old this year, and it's got its first ever English translation, and it has been published by one of our favorite groups, Free League. So, Free League has put out Dragonbane, and we have played the quickstart so far. We are going to do a campaign in it as well. Now, it is a fantasy game. It is what they call mirth and mayhem. So they say it works really well for either sort of quick one-shot games, or if you want to do a longer campaign, it's set up to do both of those. Yeah, what else is there to say about Dragonbane? What am I missing?
Yeah, I think the Mirth and Mayhem is definitely in the high fantasy category of styles.
I think so, yeah. They're going for a tone that's a little bit lighter. They say there is room for a pinch of silliness, although there are also challenging scenes for your adventurers. So, yeah, I think that's kind of a tone we can kind of find ourselves falling naturally into anyway.
Yeah, I mean, being a fan of Free League in general, we are doing a fair amount of their games, but as Emily pointed out, for some reason, Free League does tend to like a somewhat darker approach to settings. I made a quick list, and Forbidden Lands, Alien, Blade Runner, Varson, Symborium, Mutant Year Zero, Coriolis, The One Ring, and Twilight 2000 all have an element of darkness associated to them.
Yes.
Yeah, so Tales from the Loop is probably one of the only ones that came immediately to mind that is a lighter one, and certainly this one. So I like the darker, gritty ones. Blade Runner is amazing.
Absolutely. Alien was fantastic.
But I think we need to be able to have a game that is more, not necessarily fairy tale, but certainly more adventurous and swashbuckling heroes sort of feel, which this certainly does.
And definitely, I think we have seen that with Tales being a little bit lighter. It is nice to have that every once in a while. It can't all be Alien all the time.
Yeah, and I think for us as Crit Fail, it's good for us to have a lighter game because we do tend to do more heavy games that tend to have like high role play and have fairly serious topics. So every once in a while, doing one like Dragonbane is a good idea.
Palate cleanser.
I mean, for the audience too, we actually have had comments from a couple of people saying that they would love to listen to our stuff, but where they were in their particular real life, they couldn't really cope with anything too dark, so they avoided our Alien game. So something like Dragonbane should be something that they could totally get on board with, because we will be definitely playing that lighter. And I think that's how it's meant to be. Like Emily said, there's some seriousness to it, but not grimness, really. It's definitely more fairy tale fun.
Yeah, if you had to try and compare it to, I don't know, a movie, a TV show, a book, where do you think the tone kind of fits? I mean, obviously, something like Alien is Alien. You don't need to compare it to anything. People have that sort of concept of it already, but tone of Dragonbane, where do you think that kind of fits in?
I would say it sort of goes between, and I'm going to show Adam's age here.
Okay. It's Adam's answer.
Exactly. I would say it's got elements of tone from like Ladyhawke, which had seriousness but was...
Love Ladyhawke. That's not showing Adam's age.
Krull.
Okay, don't know that one as much, but I've heard of.
Willow.
Mm.
I'd say probably very, very much Willow.
Okay.
There was still a threat, there was
Mm.
still danger, but at the same time, it didn't feel oppressive in the way that something like Alien can or Blade Runner can.
Sure.
There's like an oppressive force in that sort of setting sometimes, whereas there was a villain that was dangerous that needed to be overcome. Death was very real. There was villains. General Kale, guys like that, was excessively dangerous and scary in their own way, but it felt a fantasy villain, not that oppressive force. So I would say Willow would be a good choice. Lady
Okay.
Hawk, I think, is another good one. Krull was from the same sort of era.
Right.
Any of those sort of high fantasy, we haven't really had too many of them in the same sort of way that they did in the 80s when these films sort of came out. We have had, of course, Lord of the Rings and that, but they're a
Yeah.
bit darker, and some of the more moderner ones.
I was actually thinking you could compare it more to The Hobbit, like the books, not the movie,
I was
or
gonna
the
say I don't
singular
want
book, not the movie.
Yep, yep, definitely elements of the Hobbit book. Yeah,
Hobbit as compared to Lord of the Rings, say a little bit lighter, a little bit more
Yeah,
accessible for like a short kind of term. Because like I mean, this is gonna sound obvious, I guess. The Hobbit's shorter, Lord of the Rings is longer. This you can do one shots. I don't know.
well, think of like the dwarves at the start of the Hobbit about to go out
Okay.
on a merry adventure to reclaim their homelands. Like that kind of energy is what I think Dragonbane brings.
yep, I would agree. And even the villains, I
Okay.
think the spiders in Mirkwood in the Hobbit book were more. They were less frightening in the book than they were in
In the
the
movie?
like the movie. Yeah, I think when they did the movie, they definitely tried to make them like more real
Okay.
spiders and that. Whereas I think in the book, yeah, they were still scary. They were spiders, but the way they talked and
Yeah.
the way they were using them had a bit more sort of a fairy tale element to them, I think, than the way the more modern ones would tend to use something like the Mirkwood spiders.
Sure.
So I think Hobbit is probably not a bad guide, the book either. Maybe even that. Book-wise, we could possibly be looking at a lot of those older fantasy sort of series, like Sword of Shannara, The Magician, that sort of style, which were high fantasy sort of elements. They weren't really about that oppression. Ursharak, which is one of my favorites. Yeah, I think that what Chris was sort of saying, there's a lightness and there's an energy and tone.
Okay. More adventurous, less grim, less hopeless.
Right. Right. And the characters you'll find, I think, generally are meant to be more like Madmartigan in Willow. A bit of a rogue, or they're sort of the extremes, but not in the evil directions, but they tend to be more like the knight will be very knightly, like in Belgariad. The knight in that was the perfect knight. And Madmartigan is a light character. He wasn't as deep as he could have been, but there was a lot of energy surrounding him and how he did things. And Willow, the movie, was very fun and fast paced, and I think that's what this is trying to be. I mean, not Willow specifically, but that sort of feel.
No, no. And we did. We played the quick start couple weeks ago. I am terrible with time, but we specifically played the quick start. Everybody here has been involved with it. So how did everybody find that, first of all?
Oh yeah, I mean, I enjoyed playing it for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I thought it was a fun. We just did it as a sort of one shot, one night. It was not super involved. That is something they actually have stated about it, that if you're wanting to do it more as the one shots rather than a longer campaign, it doesn't need a ton of setup or planning. So I think for people who are just kind of looking for something you can get right into, maybe doing a game night with friends, I don't know, it's got that kind of a quality to it. So I thought it was really good for, yeah, just we played it one night, it was fun, and I enjoyed it.
From a GM perspective, I was attracted to it initially by the art, because
Mm.
when they started posting the art, it was cartoony but not ridiculous. And I think we knew that the tone was going to be lighter when one of the first images they posted was a rogue duck
The Millard.
with twin daggers falling from the roof which is obviously going to try to kill something. So I think that as soon as I saw that, I thought, okay, this is going to be something a little different. We don't really play D&D, so we don't have a game in our lineup that is like D&D. So in some ways, Dragonbane was Sweden's D&D. It was very popular, as Emily said, in the Scandinavian countries, and for whatever reason, it was that appealed to them, but it really sort of filled that void for them. And I think that that's what it's doing. When I first looked at it, I thought, oh, cool, that's a game. It would be our D&D. Basically for the same reasons that everyone sort of said it. It's lighter. It's good to mix in with everything else we're doing. We didn't have much fantasy. I'm a sci-fi guy. I always have been. So my natural leaning is always going to be excited about sci-fi stuff, but I do like fantasy. It made a lot of sense for me as a GM to look at something that we could include that was fantasy, that would feel that sort of lighter, more energetic, happier sort of thing. I could see a lot of benefits from it when we did it from a GM's point of view. It's very fast from a GM's point of view. We're not going to do a big rules deep dive here. We might pass that to Scuzzball, who loves rules.
Oh, he does.
He does, yes. It keeps him awake at night.
And us
And
too.
he would love to tell everybody about them.
We love you, Scuzzy. We really do. But yeah, so we're not going to go into deep rule discussion, but for a monster, which is anything that is considered unnatural, and that's a little bit
open-ended.
That also includes dragons.
Yes.
So I don't know much about the lore yet because we are working from the quick start. I don't know if dragons, they are considered a monster, so they are considered unnatural, but I'm not always sure if that's correct. But for the rules side, it absolutely is. So a GM does not roll.
Yes.
The only thing you roll is the type of attack, which includes its effect, but you're not rolling the attack. If a dragon has breathe fire, as an example, it might, if it's number 6 and you roll a d6 and you get that, it says dragon will breathe fire. It will say how it basically works and what the characters can possibly do to avoid it. So for a GM, it's pretty quick. You just go, skeleton's going to do 3. You look at the skeleton chart. It says what attack 3 is. That's what it does. And they can parry, dodge, or it might be a will save if it's against a spell or an effect like fear or something like that. So for a GM, it's a lot less management than some other fantasy games where you have to do the attack rolls. You have to look up a lot more extra stuff. There's a lot less bookkeeping in this for the GM. I think that's good. At least it works for how I'm GMing. The next GM, though, you might find that a little bit frustrating. It's just going to depend on your particular style.
I think it works with the style of game that they're saying that this is, because if it is a little bit lighter, a little bit quicker to jump right into, mirth and mayhem, as they call it, then you don't want someone to have to be sitting there planning things out days in advance when it's just supposed to be a little bit...
Right.
Not less detailed, but just, I don't know, a little more chill.
So a lot of the rules in this case was actually on you guys and gals. So how did you find the rules?
So, I mean, certain aspects of it were definitely similar to other games. I mean, I found parts of it similar to Tales from the Loop, with the status sort of conditions you can get that are tied to your attributes. Chris, what did you think?
I thought it was okay. I think other games, specifically the Genesis system, where you have advantages, disadvantages, and success, failure, triumph, and what's the really bad one? Despair. Yes, I feel like those types of rules allow for a lot better like role play, with the roles themselves. I think any game can be good like with character interactions and stuff, but with the actual game system itself being part of the roleplay, I think that lends itself better to that. That being said, I do think Dragonbane does a better job of allowing failures to still progress the story.
Mm.
You're not standing at a door for 10 minutes because everyone keeps failing their lockpicking roll.
Yes, they do specifically state even with failure, the story is supposed to continue on. So,
Yeah, so I do like that part of it.
hey. Yeah, and for anyone who has not yet looked into Dragonbane at all, basically, when you roll, you are rolling a d20. You are trying to roll under your target number, which comes from your skills, which are based on your attributes. It's not super complex. It's going to be all kind of laid out there. You want to roll under your number. You don't want to roll a 20 in this game. That's very bad. Do not roll a 20.
If you liked old school AD&D, it kind of had that feel to me when I was playing it.
Okay.
Not the way the rules completely work, of course, they're very different, but just a sort of feel to that. So if you liked AD&D and you want to have a look at something modern, I would say give it a go. Like, the quick start is free as well, so
Yeah.
you could at least get that to have a look at and see what you think. But yeah, if you liked AD&D, I'd say possibly give it a look.
Okay, cool.
One thing I'm not sure is good
Yeah.
or bad, it's going to depend on Outlook completely, is there's not a lot of setting info, and I'm
Mm.
not sure there's ever going to be. I have a feeling, by the way I read some of it, it's more an open canvas for
Okay.
people to sort of create and do things around the framework of what they give you in the releases.
Okay.
While that's true of every single game, the amount of information obviously varies. Some games give you tons of lore, which is the framework towards to work in. Others give you less. This has given less, and that seems to be not just a quick start, which obviously you don't expect a lot. They talk about the Misty Veil, but there's not a lot of concrete information.
We had trouble working out what that was. Yes.
I think that might be a thing. Could be wrong. Like as more stuff comes out, they might keep
Yeah.
building upon it and you might get more, but it seems to be a little less, which gives you a very open framework. But if you're a GM that loves to work from the lore
Yeah.
to do everything, which some GMs are, that's where they pull all their ideas from the lore that's there and build from that. They might find this a little bit frustrating that there's not tons of that sort of lore to pull from.
As a player too, there is that because with the quick start, there's not a lot of lore you get to start with, not a lot of setting information. And also in the quick start, now I don't know, we did look a little bit at kind of character creation now that that is something you can see as well. But in the quick start, you've got pre-gen characters and you're not given super detailed backstory or anything, which is totally fair for pre-gen characters. But I found that without the setting information, it does become a little harder to sort of elaborate on what you're given. Whereas in a game with a pre-gen character where you are familiar with the setting, for example, Alien, when we played that, we also had pre-gen characters, but we were a lot more familiar with Alien than than we are with Dragonbane so far. So there, it is a lot easier to sort of expand on what you're given to flush out that pre-gen character without the same sort of level of setting information. Sometimes it can be a little trickier, I found, to know sort of what to do.
That with the pre-gen characters, like yes, they didn't give you a whole lot to go off of, and if you do just go off of that and build your whole character around like sort of what you've been given with the pre-gen, it could get kind of uh, not really boring, but tired, like overused if you keep acting the same way the whole time.
You just keep harping on the same couple points you've got on your sheet there. If your
Right.
character just kept going, I've got a bottle of perfume, and I sure do love it. My blue
Yeah.
bottle of perfume that I have, that is my memento. Did I tell you about my blue bottle of perfume?
Yes. So it's good for a one shot, but for like a long drawn out campaign, you would have to really write a whole backstory, and that's not given at all with the pre-gen, which is fine
Oh.
for a starter.
So did the pre-gens help in any way?
They definitely did help. I found and I know Chris, you also said this was true for you as well, I believe, that with the pre-gens, it's a little easier to kind of pick up a type of character you might not normally play. So I was a sort of a ranger type character in this quick start, which is not something I have, I think, ever played before, actually. And if I'd been creating a character myself, I might have not been sure where to start with that. But because with the pre-gen characters, your stats are done for you, that's all done for you. It's not necessarily as intimidating to pick up a character class you've not played because you don't have to deal with any of that. So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, and I was a wolfkin, which is a race of creature in Dragonbane that,
Anthropomorphic wolves.
yeah, I probably would not have chosen for myself when starting a new game. Like, if it was my first time, I was making my own character, I'd probably go with like an elf or a human. And I would have been like a ranger or a rogue or something like that. But in this, I was like a fighter wolf with a lance, which is not something I would have chosen as my very first character in this system. So it did help me branch out a little bit.
So pre-gens can broaden your horizons, we've learned.
And the races, not all the races were included in the pre-gen. Same with the classes. They didn't include all the
Yes.
classes either.
I don't think there was the merchant, the artisan, the scholar?
Mariner.
Mariner. Hmm.
So that's the thing I am actually interested about. One of the first things that caught my attention was the fact that there is some more unusual character races compared to a lot of games. A lot of games, like you said, they come out, if it's fantasy, you're going to have your elves, your dwarves, your humans. But we do have Wolfkin. They have my favorite, which is the ducks, the mallards.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen duck people in another game.
No. So that's really cool. I like that they've done that. And the same with the classes. They didn't have all the classes in the quick start, but the fact that they have merchant, scholar, and artisan as playable character classes is saying you don't have to make a character or game that's based around combat exclusively.
Which is great for us.
Yeah, exactly. But it opens up, I think, some possibilities that people can fall into traps with other ones. And any game can be high RP and high story, regardless of rules. But when the rules or the character classes or the abilities are all largely centered around what's going to happen during combat, it can be detrimental to make a character that doesn't fit within those confines, sort of thing. So I think
Absolutely.
that the fact that they're saying, "Hey, you want to be a scholar? You want to make a guy who knows stuff and is going out into the world but isn't very well prepared?" Well, that can be really interesting, and that's a trope of a lot of fantasy novels. That young, not always a mage. They often did it around mages, young mages, sort of thing, and they have to go out into the world and they're completely unprepared. But there's some really good stories centered around that sort of stuff, and they're sort of encouraging people to do that. So I think that's going to be a really interesting aspect to the game.
Okay.
So, two-part question.
Ooh.
Did you think the quick start was good?
Okay.
And is the quick start a good place to begin your journey into Dragonbane?
Huh. Okay, I'm going with yes and yes, and I will elaborate on that, I promise. Otherwise, that is not a great answer. Uh, yes, I did think it was good. And while I did kind of find the sort of, I guess, minimal setting information sometimes made it a little bit tricky, I definitely do think it is a good place to start. I think with the quick start, it does allow you to get a feel for the game, learn the rules without just having to sit there and read over rules, which as we've mentioned, a member of our group may enjoy, but not all of us do. It's a good way to learn while doing. It's a good way to kind of, even if you don't end up using the pre-gen characters later in the campaign, that might give you an idea for something you want to do later. Chris might go, okay, yeah, I do want to make my own character and have a more detailed backstory, but I did think the Wolfkin was cool, or maybe I would like to be a fighter type character this time. So I do think it is worthwhile for those reasons.
Yeah, I agree. I think that um the story was not meant to like be super gripping and
Yeah, yeah,
engaging
yeah.
as like the intro thing, and it was really mostly to show what an adventure in the game could be
Hmm.
like a small area. And I think that it's a pretty good place to start if you've never done anything with this game before, whether you're a new GM or a new player, new group of players. It's a good way to be introduced to it.
Now, as the GM, same question right back at you.
Yes, I will say for the players and for people in general, the quick start's free, and that's a
Yes.
huge bonus to. You'll have a look at the font style, the book style, the art style. Obviously, the main book's going to be a little bit different, but overall, it's very very similar. You get a look at the base rules. They give you the first sort of chapter, kinda, sort of condensed, but it's sort of there, so you get to sort of see what it's going to be like. The adventure itself is not the most exciting.
No, but it's, yeah, like Chris said, it's probably not meant to be terribly gripping. It's introductory.
Exactly. Yes. It's also not completely logical, but as just been stated, the reason it's existing is to let you try out the rules. Like you should
Hmm.
really be seeing, is this a game you enjoy doing? Because everything else that's more complex and fancier and that comes.
Yep.
So if you hate the core mechanics or the core way it does things, that's not going to get better with just more stuff. But if
Hmm.
you enjoyed the quick start, you'll probably, I think, enjoy the main game and what they're going to do with it. I also think it's a good place to start. Free League has been extremely good overall with supporting their games. Most of their
Yes.
games have pretty regular updates, both in adventures and other stuff. I would be very surprised if they went through all this hassle to get Dragonbane out there and then sort of don't do anything with it. So I think
And
it's
the
going to be
Kickstarter
supported.
unlocked tons of
Yes,
adventures too. Was it 8 or
yes,
something like
8.
that? Yes. So there's
Yeah.
definitely at least those 8 adventures.
I just wanted to say one last thing about the adventure itself is that it did allow for good RP as a starting adventure because it had a couple of like it could have just been here's a monster, you fight it. But no, it had like was it I think it was goblins that had been like tied up by a spider and like elements of it that if you wanted to flesh out your characters, you could through that.
From a GM side, yeah, it does hold your hand, but it's meant
Hmm.
to. The quick
Yes.
start doesn't is not meant to do anything else than to bring you an easy way to learn what they're trying to do.
Yeah, they're not throwing you into the deep end.
So yeah, I think it's absolutely, if nothing else, it's worth having a look. Regardless of what your favorite game is normally, the fact that the quick start is free,
There's no downside.
exactly. There's no reason not to download it and at least have a look.
Mm.
And if you like the look of that enough, give it a go. Get your friends and especially there's only 12 rooms or something. It's a very small dungeon because it's just there to help you learn.
Yep.
And that's the thing. You could always on one night just throw it together and say, "Hey, let's play Dragonbane tonight," and see what everyone thinks. So yeah, I think it's good. I'm looking forward to getting the physical stuff sent out.
Yes.
And
No, sorry, go ahead. I was just saying Free League always has such cool sets of all their things.
yes, I mean we're gonna have a couple of campaigns. I think I'm
Oh
I'm
yeah.
doing one, and Raven's going to be doing his fantasy game in Dragonbane.
In Dragonbane, yeah, he said he wanted to do that.
which means I get to make my malade.
Yes, you do.
I think another thing that Dragonbane does well is it seems like a pretty good intermediary step for people who have only played D&D and are just looking to try something new. I think Dragonbane is similar enough rules-wise that people can play it without too much difficulty if they're coming from D&D.
Got to reverse your brain when it comes to ones and 20s.
Yes, yes, you do have to do that. Ones are good, 20s are bad. But yeah, other than that, it's a good step in like thinking about different rule sets without being like totally everything is different. What are all these green and yellow dice? This doesn't make any sense. This is a good kind of in between.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
That is true.
Buy it; it's free.
Yeah, I was gonna say we recommend it. It's worth the free price.
Yeah, like if you play D&D each week with a group of friends, be like, hey, want to do Dragonbane for 1 week? Take a break from your adventure and
Or if you don't play D&D every week, if you got some friends you just want to have over to play a game, it's a good one to just instead of pulling out a board game, play Dragonbane.
Yep. I would actually say, as a closing thought, if you've never played a role-playing game, but you've
Ooh, this is
started
a
to
good
learn
one.
about it through Stranger Things or stuff like that, this might not be a bad one to do. It does explain how to play very easily, and
Yes.
it would probably be a good place to start. And you can't really mess it up, like, yeah, you'll do things wrong, but it won't be messed up. So yeah, actually it might be good for that as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's probably I don't know if you can speak on this, Aaron, but it's probably easier to GM than something like D&D.
Yes,
Just yeah, because of the managing the monsters and stuff.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
There's two, without going into loads of detail, but essentially, yeah, there's a lot less bookkeeping
Mm,
I found when doing this, and I don't think that's going to change between the Kickstarter releases and also like the quick start to all
okay.
that. I think this is the style it does things in, which is much less bookkeeping for the GM. But also D&D has now got so many variations in characters, races, classes, subclasses, stuff like that. There is a lot that a GM has to be aware of when someone sits at the table and says, "Can I do this and do this?" I think a lot of that stuff, because of just the sheer amount of volume of stuff now out for D&D, that's not a case with Dragonbane. So I think there's a lot of reasons why Dragonbane is a good place like that. Yeah.
So good for new GMs too.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, we highly recommend it.
Yep.
Yes. And if you want to listen to some people play it,
Yeah, you can listen to us play it.
We highly recommend ourselves.
Yes, we do.
mhm.
We can link to that in the description or something.
All right. So thanks for joining us, and we
Thanks
will
very
be
much.
back with another review discussion on something soon.
We will. And that's a threat or a promise or something.